Hey everyone, thank you so much for clicking on this review. The fact that you're willing to take a few minutes out of your day to consume my content really does mean the world to me, and I really do appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about a new Mexican Netflix series, Daughter from Another Mother. So this series is honestly, it's a really big mixed bag. There's a lot of stuff I didn't enjoy about this series. There were a few redeeming qualities that I did tend to find more positive about this series. But all in all, I would say it's a very mixed bag indeed. The rough breakdown of the story is, of course, two women are pregnant at a hospital and somehow their children get mixed up. And now these parents are left with this conundrum. What do we do? I've been raising this girl for the last 4 months only to find out she's actually not my child. And that in and of itself, the premise there is incredibly interesting. And you could do a really good character study looking at that. But I don't know if this series necessarily handles the idea too well at all. The main conflict that is set up by all of the marketing for this series is resolved by the end of the first episode. And so what you think this entire series is going to be arcing around is not the case at all. By the end of the series, it's not about these two mothers looking after their daughters. By the end of the series, it's become a family drama, and the daughters are barely a factor at all. So what initially interested me in this series was lost incredibly quickly. I know for a fact I'm sounding very sour right now, and I know exactly why that is. At the start of the series, all the characters are incredibly unlikable. They're all so incredibly different. They've all been characterized really well. They've all got their own characters. They've all got their own character flaws. They've got their own personalities. It's not like they're all clones of one another. But they are all, at the end of the day, incredibly unlikable and incredibly selfish. And of course, we've always got to start with our characters somewhere, and they have to develop. So it's easier to develop a flawed character because they have to learn from their mistakes. But my word, in the first 3 episodes, there is so little to like about any characters. So looking back at my notes, this is literally what I wrote. No one is likable. Both leads are vastly different, but just terrible in their own ways. And ultimately incredibly selfish. I didn't care when the characters were experiencing hardships, because I've seen them when they don't go through hardships, and they were selfish people. So I didn't want to support these characters. This line sums it up. Mothers are selfish, partners are unfaithful, no one cares for anyone but themselves. That is a summary of the first few episodes of Daughter from Another Mother. The first episode's main theme is, what do you do when the child you've been raising isn't your child? That is an incredibly interesting, it's a very interesting idea, but it's not executed well in my opinion. We've got these two moms, and the actresses are really good in my opinion. The performances across the board, I believe, are really good. That's one of the highlights of the series in my opinion. But the characters themselves, when you're faced with this issue of, I've raised a child that isn't mine, that's a tough one. But at the end of the day, you do have another child. You have to raise that child. And that never seems to register in these mothers' minds, that the actual child you have to look after is your flesh and blood. I understand that they were trying to show that they built a relationship around children and they missed who they believed was their child. But it was incredibly difficult to watch. So I know I've been harping on about the first few episodes and how so unlikable these characters were. That's not them for the whole series. They do develop and they do grow and they do become a lot more likable. But you've got to stomach 3 full episodes before they start to show this development and they do become more likable. It's about 40 minutes an episode, so if you're willing to sacrifice over 2 hours of your life before you can start investing in these characters, that's a hard ask in my opinion. I understand that in terms of cinema, our characters have been portrayed in a lot more of a grey light than just black and white. No character is truly good, no character is truly bad. That's visible in everything we've been consuming lately. But these characters are so murky. Even the main characters we're supposed to be supporting, when they've got issues with the bad characters, I found myself supporting the bad characters. Because they're all messed up and screwed up in their own way, and they all have very little redeeming qualities. From episode 4 onwards, once they've actually started developing his characters, then it becomes a much more enjoyable series. And I did start to get myself engrossed in the story, and I wanted to know what happens next. From episode 4 onwards, it does become an enjoyable series for you to watch. You just really have to stomach those first 3 episodes. One thing I really enjoyed was the way this series tackled the idea of what a traditional family is and what it could be. We've got 2 families here that are incredibly different. One that is more of like your traditional nuclear family, and then one that is completely broken. And somehow these 2 families have to coexist. And that is an incredibly interesting setup. And that was an element of the series I really enjoyed. Families can be incredibly messed up. But if you're willing to work through it and you're willing to stick together, that's what makes a family work. And they explore that in this series, and that shines through. As I mentioned earlier, it is a Mexican series and it's in Spanish. If you're watching this on Netflix, currently they do not have an English dub of it. So you're going to have to watch it with subtitles. One thing I will say, I think mothers will enjoy this series a lot. Not just because of the subject matter, but because of the way they approach relationships with children, with babies, with infants. And breastfeeding is actually a subtle theme they play throughout this whole series. And it's something I realized, wow, we don't see much of that in film. Like breastfeeding is a hectic thing and there's a lot of different ways to do it. And they explore that in this series. And I thought that was fun. Like, I know that's a weird thing to say. I regret saying this. But it was a good way to raise awareness about something so simple that is often overlooked. Being a mother in the workplace as well is another theme that's explored. And everyone's aware of how there's a stigma about mothers and maternity leave and stuff like that. And this series really decides to tackle that head on, which is something I can appreciate. So yeah, guys, this series is definitely a mixed bag because the first 3 episodes honestly left such a sour taste in my mouth I didn't want to carry on watching. But from that point on, once the characters start developing and they start to tackle these more interesting themes and they bring these incredibly interesting concepts forward, then the series becomes a lot more enjoyable. I don't know what else to say about this series. To sum it up, it's a really interesting premise that I believe isn't really explored correctly or in a satisfying way. It's definitely a mixed bag in regards to its characters. You have to sit through a lot of rubbish before you start to get something that's worthwhile and enjoyable. Performances are good. You're not going to get sucked out of the experience because of a bad performance. The performances are all handled really well, and I think the cast was cast really well as well. But guys, thank you so much for watching this review. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. It would mean the absolute world to me. You guys are the best, and I hope to see you in another video.